Hi, everybody. Today's April 12th, 2024. I'm honored to be on stage today with Lee from England, South London, I believe, somewhere around there. Um,
Yep.
and we're maybe going to talk about what's been going on in England and what hasn't been going on in England. What are the expectations and how kind of the general sense on man on the street kind of thing. So, Lee, tell us, what are your thoughts?
I mean, the country's just in dire straits at the moment. I mean, we've got arguably the worst government in living memory running the country at the moment, and we've got the prospect of, surprisingly, somehow, an incoming government that could be 90% worse. So it's kind of, you know, if I can speak on behalf of your American audience, it'd probably be the equivalent of someone worse than Joe Biden running for president, if that could be even be possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where we are at the moment with it. And then on top of that, we've got the London mayor who's doing everything in his power to just embarrass us even more. We've got the elections coming up for that on May the 2nd. So hopefully we'll see some joy come out of that, which might give us a little bit of hope. But yeah, it's pretty much what you would expect. We've got issues with the farmers at the moment. We've got issues with the education system. We've got this transgender movement that seems to do everything in its power to make sure that your children are as mentally ill as possible and living on antidepressants and hormone replacement tablets for the rest of their lives. We've still got the racism people hanging around, Black Lives Matter, who are literally trying to cherry pick anything possible to justify their existence still, even though we know that the Black Lives Matter movement is completely flawed. Then we've got the environment. So we've got the environmentalists. And that's something else we could go on and on and on about. With their delusions and their hypocrisies and everything else. So it's pretty much what you'd expect. It's pretty much the same as what's going on in America from what I can see, other than what you guys do in America. You tend to hype it up even further somehow. I don't quite know, but then you do that with everything. So yeah, it's entertaining. It's rather worrying as well, but it's entertaining at the moment, should we say?
Yeah, it's hard to pick and choose. I think additionally, you have something that's possibly worse. I mean, you seem to have more Hamas oriented rallies, demonstrations, so forth. I was in England in January, and every Friday, Piccadilly Circus, Trafalgar Square is taken up. And I assume that's going on still. People feel intimidated on the train.
Yeah,
there's a fair amount of violent crime going on in London.
Yeah, that's another one. The Palestinian movement. It's designed by a group called the Socialist Workers' Party. So the Socialist Workers' Party are mainly responsible for a lot of the protests that go on in London, to be fair. They're normally rocking around. You normally find them when the environmentalists are marching somewhere, and then you'll find them as well when Black Lives Matter are doing something somewhere. You normally find the people that got placards holding up. You'll normally find on top of the placard there'll be a sign, little worded sign that says Socialist Workers' Party. So they're the instigators of it all, and they're very well funded, and they're funded by a number of people. One of them, who you'll probably know very well, is George Soros. But yeah, so if we take the Palestinian protests at the moment, it's it's funny because the majority of them, when you see, well, I've seen them and I've seen videos to prove it as well. The majority of the people that go on these protests are white people, and they have no idea what they're protesting for. I mean, we done one video a while back on our channel where we interviewed a white student who was holding up about wanting an intifada. And again, it had Socialist Workers' Party on it. And he was asked if he knew what an intifada actually meant, and he had no idea. He said, his actual words were, "Oh, you know what? I don't actually know. I literally just bought this sign from a stall over there, and I don't actually know the full context of the meaning." These are the people we're dealing with at these protests. They're just rocking up, and they just seem to think that's going to be a good idea, regardless, because we have this issue at the moment where it's a case of we hate the government, so we'll protest. If you hate the government, we'll protest with you, without actually understanding or actually doing any research as to what that protest actually means and why these people are going there. So you see a majority of these white people, liberal white people, who go to these protests and they have no idea what they're talking about, no idea where they're going with it. You know, half of them didn't even know Palestine existed until 12 months ago, and you know, and the rest of them have probably never ever been to Palestine. And then you'll get the small fringe of genuine Palestinian protesters who just want the whole thing to end. And then on the other side of it, then you've got these hard-line, staunch anti-Jewish, anti-Israeli, anti-Semitism people who again are not even Palestinian. Half of them are normally they're from Turkey or they're from Pakistan or somewhere like that. So yeah, it's the stupidity and it's the hypocrisy of some of these people that makes me laugh more than anything. You know, as I said, they're turning up to these protests because they just want rid of the current government that we've got, and they don't understand the consequences of what it is they're actually supporting. If the Socialist Workers' Party got enough support, I mean, they're not going to, but if they got enough support over the course of the next 8 to 9 months and actually managed to get seats in the table at Westminster, or God forbid even run the country, I mean, you are looking at literally destruction. Because when you look at this, when you start to really nail these people down and really get to the heart of what it is they're after, you know, and as I said, it started with the Black Lives Matter protests when they started coming 2-3 years ago, I think it was, and then they jumped on the environmental protesters, and then they've jumped on as I said, the Palestinian protesters. But when you get deep down to the heart of it all, and you speak to someone who is actually from Socialist Workers' Party, their core goal is just to end capitalism. That's it. They don't really care much about what it is they're actually joining. So they don't really care much about the environment. They don't really care much about, you know, Black Lives Matter, as it were. They don't really care too much about Palestine. They just want the destruction of capitalism. And it's probably a similar thing as what you get over in America with the likes of AOC, I think it is, and Ilma, Omar, or whatever her name is, and so forth and so forth. They, you know, their core goal is just to end the capitalism and bring in this socialist movement. And as we all know, socialism is never a good idea. Never has been, probably never will be. So
yeah, no, England has had its fair share of socialism. You know, I think you know, I mean, I think it's a little bit more socialized a country than the United States. They have the NHS, which is ballast, and I think there's more which
doesn't work.
Yeah, and they have more.
And doesn't.
What we call public housing, and you know, there seems to be much more kind of, well, there seems to be less social mobility in the UK than in the United States on the basis of kind of entrenched unions, and I don't know. I mean, you tell me a little bit. It seems London's gotten better, I think, after, you know, some of the anti-socialist movements from Margaret Thatcher on. How is it we have a ostensibly conservative government right now in the UK, and it's so, you know, I don't know, I guess universally detested? What are they detested for? And how did it was, looking back, is Boris Johnson the best of this recent, kind of shuffle between him and Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak? And what happened to him? I don't know if you want to unravel any of that for us.
Yeah, I mean, the core problem is that we've got a conservative government that ain't conservative. Mm-hmm. So the policies that they put forward post 2019 are very liberal, very borderline, as I said, socialism. So in terms of the NHS, when you're talking about the NHS, for example, it is. If you speak to certain people, it's a socialist concept. A lot of people that you speak to are fans of socialists. That's the first thing they'll come up with. They'll go, oh well, the NHS. Look at the NHS. Well, let's look at the NHS then. The NHS is fundamentally flawed in every way. It's in billions of pounds of debt. We keep throwing money at it. Every government, from as far back as I can remember, has done nothing but throw money at it to try and solve the problem, and it's still always in debt. Because we have people, because this is free healthcare for all. So we have people that literally come from other parts of the world who literally come to England just for the free healthcare system, and we can't keep running it like that. It can't be done. Something has to give one way or the other. So. That's a prime example of how backwards and wrong it is, really. As I said, in terms of the government, we don't have a conservative government at the moment in place. We are only by name only. Boris Johnson has a lot of flaws. But he also is a very likable chap. So he's got a character about him, and that's what gave him a huge majority and a large popularity. And plus, he went on the promise that he was going to deliver what we all wanted, which was Brexit, which was leaving the European Union, and was securing our borders. Something happened during COVID times, and this is why. And then this is when I get to the very puzzling stage of what happened to him, because he was fine up until he supposedly caught COVID and then went into hospital for a number of weeks, and when he came out of hospital, his whole attitude towards everything changed. He literally went along with the whole environmental agenda, this great reset that we heard all about from the World Economic Forum, and he kind of just sort of like signed up to it all and just rolled on with it. And people started sort of like becoming very confused by him. It's easy to be confused by him anyway, but they were more confused by him because he wasn't the same Boris Johnson that we initially sort of like bought into and elected. Something changed in him. A lot of people say it was because he got married to his wife, and that she's very much a social liberal, if we say, very much green and everything else. So yeah, it's just, and then obviously what happened was he was pushed rather than just left over they call it a scandal, but it was because he supposedly had a party during lockdown.
Right. It seems to me that the press, both here and there, and probably everywhere, if a Democrat is found cannibalizing, the neighborhood, it'll be like, I don't know, severe hunger. They try to find some spin on it. Helping the schools, have smaller classrooms or something like that.
Yeah. It was.
Somebody on the right doesn't tie his shoelaces. It's like endangering the world because falling over and some domino effect, whatever. It seemed like it was very small pickings, and this kind of just became a scab and just pick. I understand people irritated at kind of the elitist sensibility of partying while everyone telling everyone else to put masks on, but we had it here as well. Gavin Newsom in California, was at the French Laundry. Sounds like a laundry, but it's a hugely expensive restaurant right on Montecito or something like that. I forget where, but had these huge affairs. And lots of people are all Nancy Pelosi, whatever, all giggling without masks and whatnot, and nothing happens. Andrew Cuomo, the same thing. It's like, but if you I don't know, again, tie your shoes wrong, then you're like endangering everybody if you're conservative. I think it was kind of a hit job. I just can't believe that he fell for it, and or Parliament itself in overturning it.
Yeah, it was if you take. There was two incidences, and as you just said, there seems to be this like it's okay for them, but it's not, because if you're a conservative or if you're right wing in any way, shape, or form, then obviously you're the demon and you must be outed in any way, shape, or form. So yeah, you take the case of Boris Johnson. There was such a hounding of him from the press and everything else to get him out. Eventually, he sort of left. But then at the same time, the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, he was then investigated for a similar incident. And nothing was done.
Obviously,
apparently it was fine. And it's this a similar thing, as I said, is what goes on in America. So if you look at the hounding that Donald Trump got, but yeah, everything Joe Biden seems to do seems to just be like there seems to be some excuse for it all the time.
The exact same document scandal, as it were. Although Trump's was actually less because Trump took them out as president. And Biden took them out and kept them out as vice president, which he had no command to do. But as a commander in chief, you're allowed to take the documents and declassify them. The vice president has no such powers. And Biden left them secured in an open garage, open and closed all of them. And apparently they were used for fun and profit, in his China dealings and whatnot, and picked and chosen over. And Trump had them more as a ballast, as self-protection against what they might smear him with afterwards, so he could keep some of the documents. And he kept them in a secure place in his own house, whatever, not in an open garage and whatnot. And one was dismissed by this, Robert Hur or something like that. And the other one's still going on as a case, potentially, form of election interference by other means. And it's like, it's just unbelievable. And all the scandals, the Trump is kind of like lassoed by these quasi-sexual scandals. And Biden had there's two Tara Reids, but this other Tara Reid, has a very viable story, believable story that she was molested, and had her, P word manipulated, whatever, by Biden in the hallway at the U.S. Senate, and nothing. And she's like a non-person. It's just it's an amazing flip and whatnot. But so is this Keir Starmer like inevitable? A, and B, people don't like. I guess Rishi Sunak is unlikable and sort of globalist or whatever. What changes then? Which things are going to get better? There's going to be less immigration. No, there's going to be return to the EU. I mean, which things get socialized? I don't know. How do things get better under Keir Starmer?
Well, they don't, as I said. But firstly, don't. Again, this is press manipulation, so don't take into the idea that Labour. I've said it for a long time. This idea that Labour are going to win by a stomping majority is not necessarily true. For me personally, because as I said, there's a lot of people out there who are upset with the current government, but at the same time are very well attuned to the fact that having a Labour government is going to be twice as bad somehow. So this idea that Labour are going to win by a stonking majority, I don't actually believe. I've said myself for many times, I personally believe come the next election, we're going to have a hung parliament and we're going to have no one in charge. And that's going to rumble on for a number of weeks.
Well, that'll be an improvement, possibly.
Yeah. But when it comes to as I said, this hounding of Conservative MPs, especially the ones that are trying to do good. We have a system in this country called the civil service. And this was one of the problems we've had with the border crisis that we've got in this country, where people are just rocking up on beaches every single day of the week. We've had a number of home secretaries now. So we've not just had a number of prime ministers, we've had a number of home secretaries as well, from Priti Patel to Suella Braverman, and now we've got the current one. And again, we had two really good ones. Priti Patel, I thought she was very, very good, and she was trying to get on top of it, and she put some measures in place, but she was hounded out by the civil service. And then we had Suella Braverman as well. And Suella Braverman took Priti Patel's ideas and really cemented them and made it more hardline. And again, she was hounded out by the civil service. She was a race. These are two Asian women as well, by the way, and they were classed as racists and far right bigots and stuff like that. And now we've got a current one, James Cleverly, who seems to have gone completely the other way. So he keeps talking about it a lot, but literally nothing is getting done. And this is the problem. It seems that every time we get someone who's like wants to get his really feet under the table and really deal with it, and they seem to be hounded and hounded and hounded to the point where they can't take.
To define that a little bit, we have this concept of the deep state, which is kind of embedded bureaucracy. And
yeah.
The civil service there, what power do they have? They just won't do the things they say? I mean, is this like the entrenched bureaucracy? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, they have too much power. They have a lot of sway. And a lot of them are backed by unions. So if you see the amount of strikes that we have at the moment, so where there's literally, as I said, they're trying to literally shut the country down. And again, they're all there with Socialist Workers' Party banners and everything else. So we've had doctors and nurses go on strike. We've had train drivers go on strike. We've had a number of unions go on strike, all over pay and working conditions, the usual line that they come out with. And it's got nothing to do, if you look at the train drivers, for example, the tube drivers, when they go on strike, they're going on strike over pay and conditions. Some of them are on £60,000 to £80,000 a year. That's double the amount that the average man earns a year, and they're apparently they're not paid enough. The actual leader of the union, who claims to be a working class man, earns £136,000 a year. And the civil service are the same. What the civil service do then is they just put pens down and they refuse to work. And if the civil service doesn't work, then pretty much most of Westminster and the government stops working, because there's nothing. It has, a lot of it goes through, like you said, it's bureaucracy. So a lot of it all has to go through the civil service. Similar thing to how, not similar, but I can only describe it as being like when policies get put in place in America, it has to go through is it the Senate first and then the House, or the House and then the Senate vote? And if one don't like it, then it has to go back again. And you get this issue then where you've got, well, I'm not voting for it because that's a Democrat policy. And the Democrats say, no, I'm not voting for that because that's a Republican Trump policy. Nothing gets done. And this is what we have in this country. So we have the House of Commons, and then we have the House of Lords, and then we have the civil servants who linger around in the background, and they literally complicate matters even further. And it's bad enough when we always have the House of Commons putting measures in place, and then it has to go to the Lords to get passed. And the Lords is filtered with former lefty Blair associates who are still clinging on to as much power as they humanly can, and they do everything they can to disrupt the process. And the main one is, at the moment, as I said, is the illegal immigration one. So as I said, we've had a number of home secretaries now who've tried tried and tried and tried, and it's always failed, and it's failed mainly because of the civil service and the House of Lords, because they just literally stop it in its tracks, and then then the hounding starts from the press, and then obviously then the Home Secretary has to leave then for whatever reason, and it's the same with the prime ministers. Like I said, well, after Boris Johnson left, we then had Liz Truss, I believe it was. It's been I can't remember. And a lot of people liked Liz Truss because her policies were very conservative. So it was a low tax government. But what happened was then is the financial sector got involved. So it was the financial sector that hounded her out, because the financial sector decided that they were going to shut down. When she started putting things in place that were going to affect the banks were the ones then that dictate. The financial sector in America, I'm assuming, is the same, is a very powerful setup. If they don't work, then nothing works. And she put some good policies in place that were very conservative. So it was low tax government. The only argument that you could say with her is that she done too much too fast. But this is what's coming out of the financial sector. They're all saying, "Oh no, we did like it, but it was too much too fast." I don't necessarily believe that. I just believed it was the financial sector getting worried that they were going to lose billions and billions of pounds.
So how did they get rid of her? I mean, why did she agree to leave? How did they get rid of her? Was it her own MPs that got rid of her?
Because they made out the economy was tanking, and if she stayed in
long enough for it to really tank.
That's what I'm saying. So it was a case of if she stayed in power any longer, and if the policies that she puts in place, or if the chancellor and the policies that she puts in place carry on, the economy will go into recession, and we'll lose this and we'll lose that and blah blah. So she had to so she got moved on. Ironically, we are in recession anyway.
It's one of those things. It's like, you're better to be done with it quickly. I think Lady Macbeth was talking about, she wanted her husband to go murder the king, and she said, "'Twere done quickly." If you're going to do it, get it over with. Ronald Reagan had the same issue, and we have the benefit of having our presidents, have a fixed term, as opposed to your prime ministers who are at the mercy. And so his first term, he had a huge inflation rate. It was, leftover stuff from Jimmy Carter and the big spending of the Carter era, Democrat going to Republican. And he weathered it. He cut down on various spending, and he lowered taxes and whatnot. And recovery came, and it didn't stop coming for like another 15 to 20 years. But that first year of Reagan was a tough one. I mean, I think inflation rate hit 14% or something like that, and so people were like yelling and screaming, but he just kind of battened the hatches, and there he was.
Yeah, I mean, this is where we are now with Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt. I mean, I'm a bit skeptical of Jeremy Hunt, to be fair, because I know he has these ideas. He was a fan of China's sort of like idea of running countries. So he's a big fan of monitoring, should we say. But the way he handled the inflation and that we've had is been very good. So he's sort of gradually bringing it down and down and down, just like what you just sort of like illustrated. The problem is, as I said, is that we've got into a position now, as I said, where it's gone beyond trust with the Conservative government. Now they've been hounded and hounded and hounded, and they've made such a mess of certain things to such an extent now that people have just been like, you know what, I've had enough. Because when Rishi Sunak was Chancellor during lockdown, everyone applauded him. The press applauded him. Everyone loved him for the measures that he put in place for the lockdown. So he had the furlough scheme where he was paying companies to keep people in work and paying them and everything else and that. And then all of a sudden he'd become prime minister, and now he's public enemy number one. Like I said, Yeah,
So
Jeremy Hunt is he's a complex character. The way he's handled the economy is as I'll put my hands up to him. He's done quite well with it. So he's lowered inflation and everything else. But as I said, it's a bit too little, too late. And plus, his name reeks of mistrust. Because, as I said, he's a big fan of China's social credit system, for example, and he's a big fan of monitoring everybody's movements, where, when, and how, and everything possible. And that's what kind of irks people. And again, it comes back to this World Economic Forum thing, and that's where people are with it now. They're just like, no, again, it's the wrong person. All the people that the majority of the country favoured have been booted out. They've gone. They've been hounded out to such an extent that they don't even stand a chance. Even if they did come back as Conservative MPs, they wouldn't stand a chance because the whole name now of the Conservative Party name has been tarnished to such an extent that it's going to take something monumental to get them back on track. But as I said, that doesn't necessarily mean the Labour Party are going to come waltzing in and the entire country is supporting them. Far from it. There's many people out there, myself included, who wouldn't trust the Labour Party and wouldn't trust Keir Starmer as far as you could throw him, to be fair.
Right, so what are you left with?
Well, this is it. this is the problem. We've got a new party now. We've got that's sort of like kind of led by Nigel Farage, but kind of not. Secretly, it's kind of a well-known secret. But the party officially is led by a man called Richard Tice. And there is a lot of support for that party out there at the moment. There's a lot of support for the Reform Party. There was right up until about 3 or 4 weeks ago when Richard Tice started dropping a few clangers, where people will start like, hang on a minute, like, can we trust this person, because he seems to be all about the same agenda as we've already got now, and so there's kind of a mistrust there. Everybody, or the majority of people in this country, are crying out for Nigel Farage to get off the TV, stop being a news presenter, and actually make his position heard of where he's going to stand, whether he's going to stand as the leader for reform or whether he's going to rejoin the Conservative Party. For me, if he joined the Conservative Party, I don't think it will make much of a difference in this election. I still think they would lose, but at the same time, it would give him chance to weed out the insufferables, shall we say, and revive that party, bring in new people, and start it again from the ground up. On the other hand, then there's the Reform Party, and for me, Richard Tice would need to step down, and Nigel Farage would have to be the leader of that party for that to work and become a success. There is rumours rumbling that Nigel Farage is going to make an announcement in the next couple of weeks in regards to his position of what he's going to be doing over the election and everything else. And it's kind of ironic because Richard Tice has come under a lot of pressure over the last couple of weeks. So I wouldn't be surprised if you hear that Richard Tice steps down as the leader of the Reform Party and Nigel Farage steps in. And then you might see some changes.
So in order to be the leader as a prime minister, you have to win a seat someplace, correct? So
yes, that's right.
As a third party candidate, you're not necessarily guaranteed. Let's say you're the head of the Reform Party. The Reform Party wins a certain number of seats, but you don't win your own. Is that a possibility? And the prime minister has to be a member of parliament. Is that correct?
Yes. The best thing the Reform Party can do, for me, in my opinion, is to just get a seat in the table. So become the third largest party in Westminster, if you like. At the moment, you've got the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, and then the Liberal Democrats. And then in the background, you've got the Scottish National Party, and then you've got the DUP from Northern Ireland. If Reform can outnumber the Liberal Democrats and become the third largest party in Westminster, that gives them a voice, and then that gives them a stepping stone to build on, and that's what I would be looking at. They've not been around long enough, and they haven't got the muscle yet to literally come this year when the election starts to literally just take over and become leaders of the country. That's just not going to happen. One way or another, it's going to be the Conservative Party or the Labour Party again. So for me, I would be inclined to, try and just become build. So try and become the third largest party in Westminster.
Become a coalition, one assumes.
And this is what I'm saying. So then you've got, once you're in, you can then start to dictate policies, and you can start to influence the policies and influence the way things go. So once you're in there, that's what you need to be, and then you can build on it. So if you get in there this year, you've then got 4 or 5 years to build on that and become bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's how I would look at it, and that's what I would do if it was me. But as I said, first of all, I think there needs to be a leadership change. I think Richard Tice took the party as far as he can go, and I think the country is crying out for Nigel Farage to actually step up and say, right, now's the time.
Fair enough. Now, I've been following this J.K. Rowling row up in Scotland. How is that transferable to the rest of the UK? And
yes.
Who was this Hamza Youssef? And how is it that I guess every bit of the Great Britain, including Ireland itself, has somebody who's not kind of like a traditional member of those countries? You know, I think Wales, Scotland, the UK, Ireland have, was it all Asians as leaders?
So Leo Varadkar, who was the Republic of Ireland Prime Minister, he's recently resigned, stepped down. He was Indian and gay. And then we have Hamza Youssef, who's the Scottish First Minister. He's Pakistani. Is he? No. Yes, I believe he is. Yeah.
I think so.
And then we've got Rishi Sunak, who's Prime Minister, and he's Indian. And we've just recently acquired a new Welsh First Minister, who I believe is from Africa somewhere. So we've done all the diversity.
Khan on top of that,
and then
not quite the same.
So we've done all the diversity box ticking experiments.
How's that worked out, and how do like I'll call the hereditary or traditional English feel about it? I mean, I understand London is kind of a minority, British English city. I think only 40% of the population there is white English. Say going back more than a couple generations on the territory. Is there kind of a white lash, a backlash, whatever? I mean, are things dividing out along racial terms, or is it kind of still kind of left right?
No.
How does the working class feel about this? And I assume labor doesn't really necessarily represent labor anymore.
No, labor is not. They don't. As much as they keep claiming they represent working class people, they don't. We've got this very toxic, divisive environment at the moment, where we've got, and it's not necessarily color of skin, because there's many. I've spoken to many conservative black people, and so forth. It's more European. We have a lot of pro-Europeans in London. More so than anything, but there is this growing sort of like line of racial hatred creeping in now. But there's a number of factors in that, because as we've seen higher numbers of immigration over the last, you could go back further, 5 to 10 years, even really further than that, to be honest with you. But predominantly, it's been highlighted over the last 5 years or so. We've seen this high number of immigration, and along with and it's the illegal immigration that is the prime concern. And with it, we've seen this incredible rise in crime. So we've recently got this thing at the moment where we've got a lot of violence against women, and no one wants to touch on the subject. So no politician wants to mention it, but it's unfortunately the stats just are there for all to see. But what they do is they hide behind it with the excuses of misogyny and microaggressions and everything else. The average white Western man didn't just wake up 2-3 years ago and decide to change his tune on how a woman should be treated. That just didn't happen. What happened was we've had this high influx of men between the age of 18 and 50 from parts of the world who have a very specific view on how women should be treated. I'm trying to say this as diplomatically as possible. And they've come into this country and they're still acting the same way. We've had reports and we've had incidences. I've done a recent video on it where we've had a man who was twice refused asylum, has a criminal record of sexual harassment towards women, but yet was still allowed to stay in this country, and then went on to then throw acid in a woman's face and burn her face, and then somehow in a city that's got the most amount of CCTV than any other city in the Western world, we had a Metropolitan Police Service who somehow couldn't find him, even though they had CCTV images of him roaming around on tubes and everything else, until about 3 or 4 weeks later, I think it was, when they supposedly, we still don't know this because they haven't actually confirmed it, but they supposedly found his body in the river. Don't know how it got there, but apparently he's dead now. But that's not a singular case. There's also been incidences in Scotland. There's been incidences recently in Bradford. We had again a man who was here illegally, stabbed a woman to death. We've had, I think it's about 2 or 3 incidences recently in London as well, where this has been the case. So we've seen a case in violence against women since 2000, and I can't remember the stats off my head because I've done them on the video, but I think it's since 2018, violence against women in this country has doubled, literally doubled. Yeah, that's coincided with the doubling of immigration that we've had in this country over the same period, over the last sort of like 4 to 5 years.
Yeah. There was a point, I think 20 years ago, where Stockholm became the rape capital of Europe.
Yes.
It was also the capital of Sweden. I guess it's also the capital of rape. And the image of Sweden, historically, from my upbringing, whatever, is this very tolerant place, and people are nowhere on earth could a woman be safer than Sweden, and it wasn't the Swedes, like who could it be? There's an old meme, I saw it maybe 10 years ago, and it says, "I agree with Islam about women," and it's like a little sign on a like a stop sign or whatever. It's out on the street, and it's like, and people posted this as something to make the left's minds explode, because here you are, you're being tolerant. So I agree with Islam, but it's like, I agree with Islam about women. And it's like, well, so now you're being anti-women, but then if you're anti-women, you're making the tacit assumption that Islam is anti-woman in some way. But on the other hand, you're being tolerant because you agree with Islam. So it's kind of one of these head exploders, and people put it up now and again as one of these things where it's like, you can't be for all of these things simultaneously. You can't be for protecting women and for open borders and so forth. Multiculturalism is a nice sounding word. A lot of these words sound great, but in practice, if you don't have people who want to buy into your own system, you can't have it. People can have open door policy. We've at Thanksgiving here, this is like 30 years ago, whatever. We used to take people in, and one of our friends took this kind of policy on his own, and he went to the Pine Street Inn, which is a place for the homeless, and he just stopped there and picked two people off, first people he could find, and brought them to our Thanksgiving, and things didn't work out. Everyone lived, but the people he picked out, one was kind of a active schizophrenic, and the other one had a long history of violent crime. And we were doing charity, as it were, but it's hard to do charity in your own home. We had tiny babies at the time, and we worried, for our safety, and we, nothing happened, as it were, but there were very strange things happening. And so if you invite people in your home, there has to be some tacit aspect where they are buying into your system, you vetted them in some way, and so forth. People wouldn't do this for their own house, what they're doing for the borders of our country. When we go in, when people enter the United States through an airport, they have to be vetted 18 different ways. They show their face, they have passports, they get questioned, blah, blah, blah. They have to put the back, but there's an open border, and if they just want to enter, they just enter. God knows who's coming in. We're potentially at war with various agents around the world, and all other people just can come in. It's a there was a guy from, I think, Yemen, and he's a pretty activist Islamist imam, and he wants to wreak havoc in the United States. He was pretty straightforward about it. He's on the border, and he was interviewed, and he's like death to America kind of guy, and he's just walking right in.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I saw a report recently that I think it was 50% of rapes in Sweden now have been are made by men who have recently immigrated to that country. 50%. And this is going on across Europe. So there's been the same rise is happening, as I said, in England. The same rise is happening in France, in Germany, in Belgium, and in Switzerland as well now, of all places. And yeah, it's the excuses need to stop, because you're going to, you run out of excuses now. I think this is where people are with it now, that, you've run out of excuses. You can't keep using misogyny. You can't keep using microaggressions. You can't keep using the term mental illness as well. We have this problem in this country now where we no longer have terrorists. Now, these are people with mental health problems, because obviously to class them as terrorists now is deemed insulting in some way. But let's call it what it is. These are mass murderers. These people don't like certain ways of living, and they have an agenda, and they have an issue with us, with the Western world. And they will do what they want to do. We see it. I saw one recently in France. There's a man in France who literally just had his throat cut and what so. And I mean, that was literally about 2 or 3 days ago. And it's the same demographic again. Now, I'm not saying all Muslims are like this. I never will. Same as I won't say all men are aggressive towards women and all women are whatever. I would never say it. I would never pigeonhole anybody. But to say that we can't criticize Islam without still having love for or still having friendships for Muslim people is wrong. If I can still, and I've got Muslim friends, and I can still criticize Islam, and I can criticize it towards them because they know they know who I am and everything else. But we seem to be importing these people who under no circumstances whatsoever can you criticize their faith or religion in any way, shape or form. And this whole idea that we can't criticize that religion is absurd to me, because if you take the Christians, for example, that religion has been criticized and been mocked and gets mocked on a daily basis. I just saw a thing about Rihanna, where she was dressed as a nun provocatively and everything else and that. So this, why is it that Christians and Catholics can be mocked on TV shows or in the news or for adverts or by musicians or whatever. But yet the moment you decide that you want to mock or criticize Islam, all hell breaks loose.
Yeah,
There's this mass uproar. And the other thing I find rather strange as well is I've seen videos in America on the border of Texas. And I'm trying to establish how you have a large number of the same demographics, so from Africa and the Middle East, have managed to rock up on your southern border.
right.
It wouldn't be surprised if I saw a number of South Americans. So there's Mexicans or whatever. That's quite common knowledge.
Yeah, well,
but you're getting. I've seen videos from where I don't know who it was, but he was interviewing a lot of them that were there waiting for the gates to open, and they come from the Congo, they come from Senegal, they come from Afghanistan, they come from Libya.
It could be that the tectonic plates that had once formed, Brazil and Africa once conjoined as Gondwana land, and Brazil kind of fits right into the it could be that there's still some latent land bridge we have ignored, but obviously people have tourism these days. They get an airline ticket, and if you spend $1,000 on that, it's well worth the free welfare that you're talking about as far as the NHS and whatnot. They come here, they're going to get free healthcare, they're going to get paid. Literally, they're going to be put up in a what previously oftentimes were 3-star hotels, and they're going to get they're going to get $100 a day for food. This is better off than most a good fraction of Americans do on their own, and they certainly don't get to stay in hotels where their linens are taken care of and blah blah blah. But this is an inversion. You're in some ways much better off if you don't have an ID card here. I have to pay taxes every time I sneeze. I can't tell you the number of taxes a regular citizen. I'm sure you're familiar with this, but there's taxes and fees every which way you turn. And just for our highways, we pay a gasoline tax, we pay a toll tax, we pay taxes on our excise tax on our cars, and then we pay taxes to the administrators of the highway. We pay bond issues when the highway gets, but that's just for a highway. Anyway, and then every which way you go. But if you just happen to have a fungible name, if you're Juan Gonzalez one day and then you're Rodrigo Suarez the next, you can kind of slip through the cracks. Then you're going to get paid as you go, and you can come in without a record. You can shed all those things, and people will give you driver's licenses in many states, and there's sanctuary cities. It's just an odd system, where we're favoring. I understand that the impulse to charity, but there also has to be some charity for the people who are here, and the results.
Absolutely.
There's only like a zero. I mean, capitalism you mentioned before. Capitalism's benefit, the free market system. Capitalism is actually a Marxian insult of the free market system. They called it capitalism because he wrote Das Kapital to vilify people who spent money on stuff. So I know the term capitalism is there, but the benefit of capitalism, it is not a zero-sum game. Basically, if two people make a trade, both people benefit, or else they wouldn't be making the trade. And that's kind of how people accrete growth, and they move up the kind of out of the well together. They're helping each other get up. But rights tend to be a zero-sum game. If you give rights, confer rights to somebody on some basis, you're taking them away from somebody else. Like in this case of this Scottish law, where you can't but say that somebody who decided maybe yesterday that he's a woman, you can't but call that person a woman. And that right given is a right taken away from somebody else to claim reality. It's like, well, okay, fine. He may think that, but he can't come in the bathroom with my daughter. And this is you confer rights, but you take them away. So rights, the rights spoils system is genuinely a zero-sum game. And what people don't realize when they're giving them to somebody, they're taking them from somebody else. You give the new immigrant $100 a day gift card, you're taking that money from somebody else. And I've got a couple of sons, and one of them felt that there should be a living wage for artists because naturally he's an artist. He's a cartoonist and very talented and so forth. But he thinks there should be some baseline wage. I said, well, you know what? You do me a favor. You bring to me 10 carpenters, a collection of a carpenter, the guy at the car wash, a painter, a policeman, so forth. You get them here and have them all agree that they should take 10% of their wages to give it to you so you can be cartooning, and I'm in for it. All you have to do is convince them first, and then I'll do it. I'll be the 10th vote if you get 9 other people. So this is a zero sum. It's like you want something. Well, that's awfully nice, and it's really special and nice. But that's not the way things work. Things are not by magic fairy, wishes on buttercups that you get stuff. You have to work for things, and so forth. And the system can accept immigration. It can take people who want to be here. But the type of immigration you get is endemic to the type of things you have on offer. The United States grew. Through Ellis Island and whatnot, through the late 19th and early 20th century, through people who got zero welfare. There's no such thing as welfare system. And so if they came, they had to be absorbed by somebody who was here and who fed them for the first couple of years, whatever. So they needed somebody who was willing to vouch for them and take care of them. And it nurtured a system where people had, they thought America was, streets were paved with gold and all that kind of stuff. Fine, but they had to work for it. And they were turned away if they had certain issues and problems, whatever. And they weren't kept there, and they had to do well, and they came to love the place because they worked for it. You don't love anything you don't work for.
Yeah, there's so much I could dissect from that. First of all, I'll go back to what you said about how London is so multicultural and everything else. I would love to see the names that you just mentioned, a Rodrigo or so forth and so forth in London. I never see that. The only people I ever see are Abduls and Mohammeds and everything else now. And I'm probably going to get told off for this one, but I don't care. So, as I said, this, and it's the same as what I'm seeing in America and the southern border. You're seeing these, and everything you've just described to me about the hotels and the benefit system and everything else, and that is what's happening across the board. You're seeing the incidents that I'm seeing in England are the same incidences I'm seeing in America, same incidences I'm seeing in Australia, and across most of Europe as well. So this isn't coincidence. Someone or some organization is orchestrating this, in my opinion, because you're seeing the same demographic of people moving. Yeah,
there's always the impetus for people to come here, and it's always a nice thing if you're living in the Congo, and not to defame the Congo. And frankly, there are two Congos. I think there's like the People's Congo, and there's another Congo. Anyway, there's Brazzaville and Kinshasa, or whatever. But whichever.
But why would you want to though? Why? I've said this before. Like for instance, if you've come from the Middle East, for example, so if you're Muslim, why have you travelled halfway around the world to come to England when theoretically you get better living standards in places like Dubai and Abu Dhabi,
right,
where the majority of the country are your demographic? So for instance, if you, I saw something recently where the average apartment in London at the moment is around about £2,500 a month rent, right? You can get an apartment in Dubai for a fair bit less, and it's a lot larger, And
they're actually stricter there than they are in the UK. You can't just. I don't think you just show up in Dubai. They won't necessarily keep you in Kuwait.
Exactly.
That place.
Exactly. Which is and that's the problem.
There has to be a job, and somebody has to vouch for you, and they will do bad things to you if you go out of line. They don't have the system where you get released on bail, you're on recognizance for this and that. I believe they still have the lash, they still have the death penalty, all this kind of stuff. They don't, and they literally, in the UK you can get stoned on marijuana, but in a lot of places out there you can get stoned with stones, and it's a much less. I don't think Dubai per se, but the statutes and the rules are such that people prefer to be in a place where there's kind of this social liberalism, and they can get a free ride for a good length of time, and they can bring their relatives and so forth, and they get the free this, free that. I don't think I'm not an expert on Dubai, but I do know that those places will not just let you in. They're not going to take you in. It's harder to get in and out, except for the airport. And
is that a bad thing though?
Well, I'm not. Yeah, I think that's. That's the way things. There's really no sense in airport security if you're going to have an open border somewhere else. It's just like a two-tier system.
Yeah, I mean, apart from the stoning and the death penalty side of things, I mean, why would I? I mean, I see no reason why I wouldn't want to live there.
Right.
And if I'm a Muslim, and if I have genuine intentions of bettering my life in some way, shape, or form, you know, why would I want to travel all the way to England when I can theoretically I can have a better life in Dubai? And
I
this is
think,
the thing, and this is what I'm saying. So we're not we're not importing people, and this is the problem. We're not, regardless of whether it's legally or illegally, and I'm talking about the illegal ones here. So these people that are coming over here illegally are not benefiting this country in any way, shape, or form because they're not putting back into the system. As you just said, they come over, the first thing they want is somewhere to live. They get put in hotels, they get put on the benefit system, and from then on, then they bring their family. I don't know how the benefit system works in America, but over here, once you bring your family over, once you've brought your wives and your children and everything else, and that your benefits then go up, and you get more money on top of that. And a lot of them end up earning more monthly than what I do for working 12, 15 hours a day for 4 weeks. You know, some of them are earning, you know, near to £2,000 to £3,000 a month. You know, I don't get nowhere near that on a monthly basis. So it's,
my understanding is also that if you're Muslim, you can have multiple wives and they can be supported on the UK welfare system.
yes.
Despite the fact that contravenes local law, but you know, I think there's been kind of an inversion. We got to have to end in a couple of minutes, but I think there's been kind of an inversion of policing, and I'm wondering, you know, I think I saw this on, you know, kind of the Hamas, you know, the protesters against Hamas and the Jewish protesters seem to be the ones that are kind of berated by the police. It seems to be like an inversion of standards within the police force. So I'm not wondering how much of that's kind of multiculturalism, how much just kind of like, you know, social directives.
I mean,
closing
mainly the main problem we have in London, and again, it's funny because this comes down to what the whole Scottish hate speech legislation is all about. There's this we've got this problem in England, and we've had it for quite a while, ever since the Rochdale grooming gang scandal occurred, where thousands of British girls were being raped and trafficked by Muslim gangs. And the police didn't do anything when they should have done, even though they knew about it. They didn't do anything when they should have done because they were afraid of being called a racist. And this is what now is happening with the protests in police. And so we're seeing protests against genuine causes, for example, like the ULEZ measures, the environment measures that Sadiq Khan's putting in place. We're seeing riot police come out and literally manhandling 60, 70-year-old women with ease. Yet when the Palestinian protests are on the march and they're letting off flares, even though that's supposed to be illegal and arrestable, and locking down roads, even though that's a traffic offence and everything else, the police don't seem to do anything about it and don't want to do anything about it. And we used to see it with the Black Lives Matter thing as well. And that's where the whole hate speech law from what Scotland has done has been put in place. Is the reason why he put that in place, because it's not about eradicating hate speech, because there's no such thing as far as I'm concerned. It's about eradicating people's concerns and opinions on something that are genuine. So as I said to you before, you know, there is genuine concerns about the amount of immigration we're getting from a certain demographic of people that are spending as little as 6 weeks in this country, be it Scotland, Wales or Ireland or England, and are committing sexual offences. This is fact. But now, if I was to say that in Scotland in a different kind of way, and I think you know what way I'm talking about, where I sort of like pin that demographic down to a certain specific, then I am literally now I could be arrested for that, and that's wrong on every level. Because, as I said, there's no reason why I shouldn't be held to criticise a certain religion for their ideology towards women, and the reasons for that person coming into this country and committing the crimes that they do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not all religion. I think a lot of it is that there's a lot of young men come over, and they see different aspects of culture and whatnot. I mean, I don't think it's all under religious directive by any means, but because I don't think you see that level of rape in Muslim countries. I think it's opportunity, lack of punishment or whatever. I mean, it's just and then there's urges, and they're there. Who knows what? It's a lot of different things.
Well, it depends, doesn't it? It depends what country it depends what Muslim country you're talking about. So this is what I'm saying. So if you go to places like Dubai and Saudi Arabia, and you probably won't find that amount of crimes against women. But yet we all know that if you go to places like Afghanistan, and if you go to places like Libya, and if you go to places like Iran, there's very much a different attitude towards women. And this comes down fundamentally it comes down to the religion, because it's based on how they perceive their religion. Islam is very conflicted in its ideologies. It's the reason why you have Shiites, and it's the reason why you have Sunnis. So they're both Muslims. They both practice Islam, but they have two different interpretations of how it's incorporated, and hence the reason why they're violent against each other. This is why there's this common theme that people say, if you got rid of Israel tomorrow from the Middle East, Muslims would still be at each other's throats.
Well, they have been. Yeah. Part of the reason you have the trouble in Europe is the war in Syria. That was not, there was no, Israeli. There are no Jews in Syria, pretty much, and it's like and you have the Iraq and you have Iran versus, in the 70s you had Iran versus Iraq. There's no end of it, and obviously there have been incursions by the Iranis put the Houthis up to deal with Saudi and give them a thorn in their side, and I mean there's no end of it. There's wars in Sudan. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Strife, Egypt. There's no shortage. There was the Polisario and Algeria went on for decades. There's no Muslims have killed more Muslims than anybody else has killed Muslims. I'm with you on that. Anyway, we're going to have to call it a day for today.
No problem.
Your time. Any final words for us?
No, just thank you for having me on. Thank you for everyone who's listening. Please come and have a look at our channel as well. I'm sure you'll put a link on it somewhere on the description. But yeah, I hope all goes well in America. I
had some tough dreams. I'm very upset about the way there was a ceasefire in Gaza. If you go backwards in time, I was telling this to Norman Fenton yesterday, but back in the silent movies, a lot of their tricks, if you watch the silent movies, Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin, there are these huge things falling right in front of them, all these incredible things. And apparently what they did was they ran all the film backwards. So they have the guy walking backwards while it's filming, and they have something being lifted in front of him.
Yeah.
All these things happen. When you run the film forward, it looks like all these calamities are happening. He's totally blithe about it and they're falling right in front of him. But basically, you could have a ceasefire. You just need to run the film backwards. And if October 6th and October 5th there was a ceasefire, and I think they handed over Gaza in 2005 or something like that. So 19 years of self-rule in Gaza. They could have turned into Singapore. They could have turned into Dubai.
Yeah, they don't want a cease. Not the Palestinian people. I have to get this right. Hamas and Houthis and Iran don't want a ceasefire.
Yeah.
What they want is Israel to stop retaliating.
Yeah.
Because if Israel stops retaliating, as you've just pointed out, Hamas would still fire missiles over to Israel. Because as I said to you, you could lift Israel away from that area tomorrow, move it over, and Hamas and the Houthis and whoever else would soon find someone else that they want to get have a row with over whatever. Yeah. It's just
I saw this
It is.
video clip, I think from the 70s. It was an Egyptian professor, and he said it's not. Everyone's like land for peace, land for peace. He says, look, it's not about land for peace. He said, if every Jew there converted to Islam tomorrow, and Israel said, we're going to get rid of the Jewish flag, we're going to put up a crescent or whatever, and everybody there, bowed to Mecca, there'd be no war. It's not about the land; it's about the religion. And that was like, it was kind of like mind explode. And I think that's going to be the case for Europe. You guys, it's kind of an irony. There's all these calls for, the European Jews in Israel go back to, everyone's like in Gaza, like, you're not from here, go back to Europe. On the other hand, there's 44 million Muslims in Europe, and some of them were indigenous, like in Albania, maybe, and in parts of, Kosovo, or whatever. But most of them are, if you don't think about kind of the Russian Caucasus, Dagestan and whatnot, most of the 44 million were recent, relative 2-3 generation transplants. And it's like, is anyone talking about they're moving back? If the Jews have to go move to Europe, are all the Muslims going to go move back to, you name it, Turkey, Pakistan, whatever? No, nobody suggests that. Everyone's supposed to, people land where they are. They have every right to be there, blah, 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 maybe. And so forth. But anyway, it's kind of an odd system and a lot of hypocrisies. And we're probably going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for being with me, Lee. And hopefully we'll get to chat again. And I'll mention your channel on some of the links.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
So how was that for you? I hope that was okay.